Hey, what's going on? So this Halloween, it's upcoming Halloween. We have a couple of good games. Some fan bases are either gonna have a treat or a trick, and I'm only gonna be able to watch one game really, and I'm only gonna discuss three today. But I'm gonna make a couple predictions on a couple of games that I'm not going to discuss in detail down in the description below. So we'll see how that goes. But I just want to comment on the game last night. The games last night. TCU handled business, no surprise there. But one thing I really want to comment on was that Gene Chizik has done an outstanding job as a defensive coordinator at North Carolina. Last year, there was not one game where they gave up less than 20 points, and there were about, I think, six or seven games where they gave up 40 or more points, and which included 3 games that they gave up 50 or more points. They gave up 50 to Clemson and Notre Dame, and they gave up 70 to Eastern Carolina. While this year, they've only given up more than 20 points one time against a 38-31 win against Georgia Tech at Bobby Dodd Stadium. So I know they're not playing TCU and Baylor every week, but I think it's really considering how they did last year and compared to what they've done this year, it's been a really remarkable job, and I think Gene Chizik deserves a lot of credit for what he's done there. So moving forward to some games tomorrow, we have one at noon that I'm interested in, which will be number 19 Ole Miss, who's 6-2, coming off of a big win against Texas A&M, going into Jordan-Hare Stadium to play Auburn, who last week lost in quadruple overtime to Arkansas. Right now, Auburn is 4-3 overall, 1-3 in the SEC. After edging Kentucky out, though, that game was a very close one, and they easily could have, fallen to 0-4 in SEC play. They really could be there right now. The offensive side of the ball hasn't been clicking. Jeremy Johnson hasn't, been, the next coming of Cam Newton. I think they've been starting White a lot lately, and on the defensive side of the ball, they haven't. Will Muschamp, he needs time. He hasn't. Give him about like 3 recruiting classes with his players. I think that Auburn will be a force on defense if he stays there for that long. But that defense was, a lot of people were expecting a quick fix for Auburn and on defense, and that has not been the case. So, based on Auburn's difficulties and Ole Miss bouncing back from that loss to Memphis with a resounding win over Texas A&M, I think Ole Miss is gonna get this tough win on the road. I just think that I think Ole Miss has lived up to the expectations. They obviously people weren't expecting them to lose to Florida, but the Bama game was kind of a toss-up. So, and the Memphis game was a bit of a surprise. But most people probably would have expected 1 or 2 losses by Ole Miss at this point, and Auburn obviously has not lived up to their preseason expectations. And with that said, I just think that Ole Miss is a better team from what I've seen from both teams thus far, and I think they're going to win tomorrow. And then we at 8 o'clock we have a game that I'm sure at the beginning of the year nobody was anticipating as being a top 25 matchup. Where we have number 9 Notre Dame, who's 6-1, going to the Link to play number 21 Temple, who right now is 7-0, 3-0 at home. I think that Temple, Notre Dame under Brian Kelly outside of 2012 has generally lost this type of game. They lost to Florida State last year. I think they're perennially a top 25 team. I'm not convinced that they're a top 10 team. Obviously, they could do a lot tomorrow to make me eat crow and maybe start convincing me that they're a top 10, top 15 team, but I'm just not buying it. I think that Temple, this game kind of really, has a lot of similarities to me to the game between Memphis and Ole Miss 2 weeks ago. You had a Ole Miss team that was a bit overrated coming into a hungry, undefeated Memphis, and since this situation seems to be the same thing we're going in tomorrow, so I think that Temple is going to pick up the upset. Matt Rule, the third-year coach, 13-16 overall. So obviously he's really turned things around this year. This has been the pivotal year, but I think that I think that Temple is going to win, and maybe Miami could take a look at Matt Rule for a possible replacement for Al Golden. Just kidding. But that kind of brings up another point, though. Talking about Temple being 7-0, but right now in the AAC we have 3 7-0 teams. In the West we have Houston and Memphis, and obviously just Temple. And you could say that, well, the AAC is not a Power 5 conference, and they what is the significance of this? And I think it's worth noting that the AAC is not an elite conference, but all these teams have significant wins against all the Power 5 conferences except for the Pac-12. Houston beat Louisville, Memphis beat Kansas out of the Big 12. I mean, I know that's not the best representation of the Big 12, but still, it's a Power 5 team, and Ole Miss, which was a very impressive victory. And Temple started off the year, really soundly beating, Penn State out of the Big Ten. So if Temple gets this win against Notre Dame, then they'll have a win against the top independent team in the country, and it's going to be really interesting moving forward. During playoff times, what's going to happen if we have an undefeated AAC team? How that will get brought into the discussion. I mean, obviously, there's only going to be one team, if any, because Houston and Memphis play each other in a few weeks, being in the same division. And if Temple continues on this path, and one of the winners of the Houston-Memphis game continues to the AAC championship game undefeated, then we're going to have we potentially could have an undefeated AAC team, and that will be it'll be interesting to see how that will factor into the playoff picture later this year. But that remains to be seen. Obviously, Temple needs to win tomorrow for this to even be a discussion, but the other teams need to handle their business as well, and there's a lot of football left, so it'll be something to keep an eye on, though, as the season progresses, on those 3 teams, Houston, Memphis, and Temple, to see if they could potentially make some playoff noise, especially if every team in the Power 5 gets at least one loss. So it'll be interesting to see how how that'll spice some things up later in the year. So now tomorrow at 3:30, it's a big game around here. Florida is 6-1, 4-1 in the SEC. Is going to go down. Well, they're going to go up. Georgia's going down there to Jacksonville to play. It's going to be the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. I am. Georgia's 5-2, 2-2 in the SEC. Florida just coming off of a tough loss on the road at LSU 2 weeks ago, and Georgia won a field goal kicking contest against Missouri 2 weeks ago, which resembled the 9-6 game between Alabama and LSU in 2011 in score only. Whereas that game a few years ago was the result of 2 outstanding, overpowering defenses. Not to take anything away from the defenses of Georgia and Missouri this year, but that result, a lot of that result also stemmed upon offensive ineptitude than just pure defensive brilliance. So, last year, this game, it's kind of a little bit of a reverse scenario. Last year, Georgia had, was in the driver's seat for the SEC East. Florida kind of had an outside chance. Florida was coming in from, they had a home game against Missouri, which they got absolutely slaughtered. Whereas, Georgia this year just, squeaked by Missouri. And, last year Florida ended up, running, was the big underdog, and they ended up, running Georgia off the field. They had 418 yards totals. Their, two running backs, Kelvin Taylor ran for 197 yards, and Matt Jones ran for 192 yards. And, a lot of people think, Florida's offense is, better this year. So it should be a Florida victory. Not so fast. In terms of coaching and schematics, yeah, Florida is definitely a lot better on offense this year, but in terms of talent, at least in the trenches, not necessarily the case. Part of the reason why they were able to run so effectively against Georgia last year, where they had 4 linemen who got drafted in the NFL. They had DJ Humphreys, who Arizona drafted in the first round, Chaz Green, who was drafted by the Cowboys in the 3rd round, Max Garcia at the Denver Broncos drafted in the 4th round, and Trenton Brown at San Francisco drafted in the 7th round. And they also lost the lineman to Roderick Johnson to a spine injury during the offseason. So Florida's offensive line has not been, it's been a real patch job. They have 3 true freshmen playing, getting regular play time. Martez Ivy, one of them is Martez Ivy, who's a 5-star from Apopka, Florida, who was the rated number 1 offensive tackle in the country. So, even though he's in the top, he's a true freshman, but he's in the top true freshman. Still, a big leap from, high school to the SEC. And you also have 2 other true freshmen playing regularly in Fred Johnson and Tyler Jordan. And, they also lost Matt Jones to the draft last year. So really, their only, really experienced running back that they have this year, with Adam Lane transferring, who didn't really get that much play time last year anyway, is Kelvin Taylor. So, basically what I'm getting at is we're not going to get a repeat performance of last year in terms of Florida racking up 400 yards. I just don't see them with that offensive line, and with only Kelvin Taylor being the only real experienced running back that they have. I just don't see it happening. They have a pair of pretty good true freshmen, or potentially good true freshman running backs in Jordan Scarlett and Jordan Cronkite, but they're still very young, very raw. KT's been really the only one who's been, who has, any amount of yardage in, throughout the year. He's averaging 3.6 yards per carry, 463 total with 8 TDs. Georgia's running game, on the other hand, has been a lot more effective. Nick Chubb, who's obviously they're going to be missing, has been averaging 8.1 yards per carry with 147 yards and 7 TDs. And Sony Michel, who's going to have to step up and to the plate for this game, is averaging 5.7 and has 508 yards, 4 TDs. And it was announced yesterday that Georgia is going to be starting their 3rd string quarterback. I really have a hard time pronouncing his name. It's going to be fun trying to hear Vern Lundquist pronounce it. I think it's Fatin Bauta. I guess that's the best stab I can give at it. But I don't really know much about him except that he was behind Grayson Lambert and Ramsey on the depth chart until this week. Until yesterday, really. He was called up, and he's going to be the starter. From what I know, he's a mobile quarterback, so that indicates to me that Georgia is going to try to do to Florida this year what Florida did to them last year and win the run game. Florida is only averaging 2.8 yards per carry in SEC play, last in the SEC. As I mentioned, they have a young offensive line and one experienced running back. Their coaching has been better, and their pass game has improved tremendously. I mean, they have 5 receivers with over 200 yards. You have with DeMarcus Robinson, 371 yards, 2 TDs. Antonio Callaway, true freshman, with 308 yards and 2 TDs. Brandon Powell with 294 yards and 3 TDs. And then you have 2 tight ends, DeAndre Goolsby with 214 yards and a TD, and Jake McGee with 200 yards and 3 TDs, who are really been, the Florida offense has improved in the passing game, but their run game has regressed. And I think, if they're going to beat Georgia, they're going to have to, pass the ball effectively. Their run game has to improve too, because I think that Georgia is really going to try to win this game on the ground. I think a part of the reason why they're also putting in this kid Bauda is that their pass game has been struggling. They only have 2 receivers with over 200 yards of reception yards. And Godwin has 203 yards and no TDs, and Malcolm Mitchell is pretty much carrying the team in terms of offensive production on the wide receiver side with 503 yards and 4 TDs. So their pass game has been struggling. And Florida, even though their secondary has looked a bit suspect at times this year against ECU and LSU in particular, is generally considered to be one of the better backfields in the league. And if you have a struggling passing game, you don't really want to try to make it work against what's considered to be one of the better passing defenses in the country. So what I'm predicting is that Mark Richt is going to pull out a lot of tricks tomorrow. Dog fans are going to be hoping that it'll lead to some treats, and I think that he's going to really try to do what Muschamp did to him last year in this game and try to run the Gators out of the stadium, win that battle in the trenches. It'll be I think the Dogs have a pretty solid offensive line. The Gators have a very solid defensive line, and that'll be that'll be the key to the game tomorrow. If the Gators' defensive line shuts down that Georgia run game, it could be a rout. But if Georgia, if that offensive line really steps up, which I think they'll definitely. I think Georgia. One thing I'm definitely gonna predict is that Georgia is not going to not show up like they did last year. They're gonna show up this year. The question is, if it'll be enough. And I think that I think it'll be a pretty close game because, like I said, I think Georgia is going to show up, and I think that they're going to really, I think that with Bauda being a mobile quarterback, they're going to try to copy what Tennessee's game plan was for the first 56 minutes, at least, of that Florida-Tennessee game this year. Dobbs was able to run the ball pretty effectively against Florida, so I think they're going to try to do similar things, maybe run some read option. They're going to try to maybe even overpower them a bit. If the power run game doesn't work, they might try to go outside. Long story short, I think that Georgia is going to try a lot of different things on the ground and try to control the game on the ground and win the game from that. So with that, I want to wish you all a happy Halloween. I'm only going to really be able to watch the Georgia-Florida game. Things down here a bit different than up north. Up north, I would always try to get away during holidays, but down here, it's kind of like it's a really different culture in terms of how they treat the holidays. Like I said, in New York, everyone's always trying to get out of town during the holidays, but here everyone's coming into town and they have a lot of events that I'm going to check out. But I'm definitely not going to miss the Florida-Georgia game this weekend, without a doubt. I mean, that's one of the events. It's pretty much a statewide holiday here. I've been hearing a lot of talk about it on the street this week, and people are really excited about it. And it's always an exciting game, but this one is going to be particularly exciting with the SEC East implications that are looming over it. So, I hope you all have a happy Halloween, and I'm looking forward to the game this weekend.